Thank you. Thank you, Jem. Thank you for asking me to do this. And what you've given me some really tough acts to follow. Thank you, the last speakers. You were amazing, just amazing. I've loved everybody that I've listened to. I had a hard time getting on and I started to panic. It's like, he'll think I didn't want to do it if I can't get in. And I would never want to think that. I have been blessed with step 5 to share with you. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Oh my God. I drank so I wouldn't have to look at this stuff. My sobriety date is July 26th, 2000. I had another sobriety date. It was January 19th, 1983. And in that sobriety, I stayed sober for 16 years. And you know what? I got every one of the gifts that was promised in this program without doing very much, without having to work a hard program. Things just came. I had everything I could ever have wanted. And one day I didn't. I was only out for a year, but in that year, it taught me all the lessons I needed to learn so that I know I never ever want to drink again. I cherish these 19 years sobriety and I will not go out again. I was born in Glasgow, Scotland, to a very disturbed man and his very beautiful wife. I have a little sister, and she's my little sister. She's only 3 years younger than me, and we're not little girls anymore. We were raised in Glasgow, post-war Glasgow, in a place called the Gorbals. I know there's some people from Scotland here, because I saw you on my Scottish AA thing asking for the code. My dad was a drinker, but mostly he was just very emotionally disturbed and very scarred, and he was abusive, and our life was hell. We had an amazing neighborhood in that little place in Glasgow, and the women helped each other, and a lot of the men drank. And this was a long time ago, many years ago. And I just remember always being afraid, just always being afraid. My dad was, he was unable to give us any good moral direction. I think, you know, I laughingly say, he would say, brush your teeth, you can't tell a good lie with dirty teeth. He told a lot of good lies. He was always carousing somewhere, and he worked at being a career criminal. He was always doing something. So our life was feast or famine, went like this. And I was always afraid for my mom. That's the feeling that I always had. It's like, is she okay? Is she going to be okay? And I was like her lieutenant in keeping the peace. I realize now that was not my job, but for a long time, I didn't realize that. So my job was to help her keep a lid on this poor man who was crazy. When I was 7, he went to jail for 4 years, and that was the most amazing time in my life. My mother had 3 sisters, and they were so bonded. They had lost their mother at an early age, and they were bonded, and they were loving, very loving. And he came home when I was 11, and it was like, phew, the whole world just collapsed. And we were afraid all the time. When I was 15, I left school. That was what we did way back then. I left school and went to work in a factory. And, you know, I remember thinking, I don't think I'm supposed to be here, because I was very, very well read. I would be in my room reading. And it's so funny, you know, I'm in La Quinta, California, which is close to Palm Springs, and I have a place near Joshua Tree. And we, the stars at night up there are amazing. And in one of James Baldwin's books, he talks about being on this rooftop and looking up at the sky. And he says, the sky was like a giant ocean in which no one is allowed to drown. And I remember thinking, I want some of that. I want some of that. I want some of that peace that he described then. Anyway, I was working in a factory in Glasgow in the city centre. I was working in a sewing machine factory. And I was only there a matter of weeks. I'm 15 years old. And I went drinking with the older girls. We went to this bar nearby. And I had a few drinks with them. And the girl next to me, who was a seasoned drinker, said, "I think I'm drunk." And I looked at her and I said, "I'm not drunk. I'm just really, really happy." And you know, we talk. I've heard other alcoholics say it was like finding the key. That was my key. It was like something else opened up, and it's like, oh my God, everything's gonna be okay. You know, I felt this is the panacea for what I've been waiting for my whole life. It's gonna be good. Well, you know what? It was good for a while, and I was able to hold my liquor for some reason. But early on, I had blackouts. Um, you know, we would get very dressed up, as dressed up as we could afford at that time. I'm 15. I'm working. It was a 6.5 day week then, um, and I'm working Friday nights and Saturday nights as a waitress. You think that wouldn't be leave me a lot of time to get into trouble, but it did. So I'm working and drinking when I can and hanging out with my friends. Because when my dad came home when I was 11, I, uh, I think I had a very special friend there, and I did not want her to see how much pain I was in, and I couldn't be her friend anymore. I couldn't bring her to the house, and you know, I still grieve that relationship. You know, and that would be one of the amends I would love to be able to make. You know, but one of the things that's very, very prominent in my mind. We're going from one bar and we were going to go dancing. And we had to walk through a kind of seedy part of Glasgow to get to this dance hall. And we pass a bar, and outside the bar, um, there's a woman lying on the pavement, and she just peed herself. She's unconscious, drunk, and there's two little kids sitting beside her crying. You know, and it's like my brain takes that snapshot and felt it, and then we moved on, and then we drank some more. You know, I drank not to feel. We drank not to feel. Um, when I was 15, I met this amazing guy. He was a very sweet guy who came from a good family, and I knew they knew that I wasn't worthy because I didn't feel worthy. I remember one time saying to my dad, I was thinking when I was young, I had very long black hair, and this is natural now. But I remember saying to my dad, I'm thinking about doing something with my hair, and he said, you know, as unattractive as you are, you probably don't want to draw attention to yourself, you know. And I could hear it. It's like, it's true. And I always felt like that. Almost something wrong with you. There's something just not right with you. But when I was drinking, there was nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong at all. I was engaged to be married when I was 16 years old. And this nice guy had an opportunity to finish his engineer apprenticeship, and he had to go somewhere for 3 months at a time. And you know what? I felt abandoned, and he needed to be punished, and I punished him. I punished him and I left him and I went with somebody else. And you know, I so regret that. That's another amends that I will never get to make. You know, and I'm happy. I'm sure he's been living a wonderful life with a good wife that's better to him than I would have been. So I moved to England, and I found a group of friends that drank just like I did, and it was amazing. I lived in the Isle of Wight in the south of England for a while, and we drank a lot there. And I got engaged to a man I met there, a nice guy. He was a nice guy as well. You know, I had these nice guys, but I did not recognize it because when I was growing up, there were not any nice men around that I could see. My dad's friends that gathered were not the guys that I would have wanted them to stay. So my thinking was really screwed up. my mom was my mom, I loved her so much. She was so kind and so sweet, and she was never rewarded for that kindness or sweetness from the man that she loved. Anyway, she was in the process of or she was actively dying from the last beating that she had, and I went home to help a little bit with that. And this time I'm what, 22, 23, and I felt old, I'm thinking maybe it's time I got married. So I go home, and my sister gets a relief. She gets to go. My dad is out there somewhere, but he only comes back to cause havoc. He's got another girlfriend, so he's fine. And I'm drinking a lot. My battery's dying because I've been listening to you guys all morning. So I meet somebody else, and I meet somebody that's a bigger alcoholic than I am. So you know what? I don't look like so bad. And he comes from a very similar background than I did. I don't want to tell his story, but I always say his mother had 7 kids. And the only difference in her relationship and my mother's relationship was that when her husband wanted to beat her, she would run through the street screaming with all her kids running behind her. And when my mom was getting beat, she did not make a sound. I would hear her being hit off the walls in the other room. And one time I heard her saying, "Stop, Jimmy, you'll wake the kids." That was her only. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be her. I don't want to be her. So I got married to this amazing guy who's the father of my 2 children. And we moved to California. We moved to Pasadena, California. We're both active drunks. And it was amazing. It was like going from dark to light, but it seemed like there was opportunities opening up that we never had before. One of them, the first one, was marijuana. I was growing marijuana on my little balcony in the apartment complex we were in. But when we moved into that complex, I wrote to all of my friends and I told them, I can see a palm tree from my kitchen window. And it's like when I say it, I remember how I felt. And that was 1977. So that was a long time ago. Our son was 3 when we moved to California. He was 3. He was a tiny little guy. He was amazing. He is amazing. And I started working there. I went to a sewing machine factory there, and one of the girls said, "What are you doing here? I don't think you're supposed to be here. Why don't you go back to school?" It's like, it was so funny. It's like, yeah, well, maybe. So, and I don't know if it was her that planted that seed, because when I was young, I wanted to go to art school. I like to paint. I like to write poetry. I like to do that stuff. But I went to work as a nurse's aide, and then I thought, maybe I could go to school. You think I could go to school? And that planted the seed, and I was thinking about it. But in Pasadena, we found a Scottish pub called the Loch Ness Monster, and we went there a lot. And we met this amazing Scottish family, and they would go there, but they were not alcoholics. A couple of their kids were, but they were not alcoholic. Anyway, and then I had my daughter, Kirsty. She was born there. She's 3 years younger than her brother. And I was still working. Her dad's working. He's a painter, and we're comfortable. We have a nice house. And he got sober. And it's like, oh, we got sober. He got sober first. And I always say, when your husband's sober, they notice what time you're coming in. So we had some stuff going on. Well, the good thing was I started nursing school. Nursing school was gone. It was going pretty good. You know what? I was doing things I would never thought I could. And then the drinking started to interfere. When everybody else was studying, I would go drink on the weekend. And then I dropped out of nursing school thinking, I guess that's it. But I knew that it was the alcohol that had done that to me. So he has 3 years sobriety, where we're hanging out with some sober people, and I decide it's time for me to get sober. So I went to this, it's in Pomona, my first meeting just for me, because I'd went to meetings with him. But the first meeting that I went to for me was in a place called the Triangle Club. And it was a noon meeting. And I remember walking in there, just feeling like it comes to this. And I did think, if only I had drank like a lady just a little while longer. And I never drank like a lady. But there was an old guy at the door. His name was Gene. Now I'm talking a long time ago, 35 years ago. And Gene would look at people and go, "Is that your car? Did you just drive in that car? You have a watch? You're not ready to get sober. You need to go back out and do some more drinking." And I remember years ago, they thought that only low bottom drunks could get sober. And I appeared to be a high bottom drunk when I came in. But I did not want to be there. And I sat down and I looked around, and yes, I was judgmental. And I thought, this place looks like the mutant bar in Star Wars, and I shouldn't be here. And I'd only sat down a little bit. The meeting started, and this big old guy sitting beside me put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Welcome home." And I felt it. Sometimes you just feel the truth. This is where I'm supposed to be. So I sat and I listened. And they asked me to share, and I just said, this is my first day of sobriety. And this little woman sitting across, I'm 5'3", I'm the tallest. I'll lie. I'm 5'2", I'm the tallest in my family. And this little woman who waved over to me, she was 4'10", same as my mom. And she was from Glasgow. And she said, "We're going to talk after the meeting." And I said, "That sounds good to me." And she took me for lunch, and we talked and we talked, and she'd been sober a while. And she told me, "Just try and have a wee bit of faith." And I didn't have any faith. I went to Catholic school. It was brutal Catholicism training. We had the priest that used to come in and strap you with this leather belt if you got the catechism question wrong. So I didn't want that one. And I tried, and you know what? And I started working a program, half-assed. And I worked my program, and I finished nursing school, and my daughter grew up, and my son's growing up. My son's growing up, daughter's growing up. My husband got some sobriety behind him. I've got a good 10 years behind me. And I'm thinking, is this all there is? So my husband and I got divorced. We're still very good friends, thank God. We're still very good friends. We got divorced. I moved to Palm Springs. Life is good. I make great meetings in Palm Springs. There's a lot going on. I'm working as a nurse at the Desert Aid Project, and it's good. Life is so good. I'm celebrated 16 years sobriety, and I hadn't been to, then I didn't go to a meeting for I think it was maybe just 3 months. And I was in Amsterdam with a friend, and we're having dinner in this beautiful restaurant. And I said, "Oh, that's the beer I used to drink when I was a kid." And one of the other speakers said something like this. Unconsciously, I had that drink. I had that drink, and I remember thinking, and nothing happened. I was expected to be struck by lightning. Nothing happened. And then I had another one, and then we went to the brown cafes, and then we came home, and nothing happened. But the drinking was escalating, and my good fortune and my good nature was de-escalating. Then one day I said to my partner, "You know what? You like to drink and I like to drink. I think we should open a pub. We were both registered nurses. Anyway, we opened a pub and it was hell. There was not enough booze in the world. We opened a pub. Um, and my behavior was horrible. It was just horrible. I met somebody that I would never ever in my life have thought I was. And the partner I had then, I was screaming. We were having an argument and I was screaming. And I could hear my dad's voice. It's like his voice was coming at me, and I was screaming at this person like I was a mad person. And that was my moment of clarity. Absolute moment of clarity. I left that relationship. I left that pub. I ended up with absolutely nothing. Everything I had built up, nothing. I left that. I left that relationship and that everything with my big dog. I had a big. He looked like a Rhodesian Ridgeback baby. I left with that and nothing else. And people helped me. I detoxed at the meetings. I'm a nurse. I never should have detoxed by myself. I should have went to one of those fancy places where they let you play ping pong and feed you. I didn't do that. I went with a friend and I went to the meetings in the morning and I detoxed at the meetings. And they loved me and they accepted me back. Talk about the prodigal son. I came back there and I know what pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization feels like, because you know what, I was on top of the world when I moved to that city and that little town, and I had everything I could ever have wished for. And you know what, I was working a half-ass program, and I think I was talking to somebody last week and they said, what happened? I said, you know what, I had everything I could ever have wished for, and I really hadn't worked for it. I did the steps, I did a little fourth step, and I did some other steps. I worked with a couple of people, but you know what? My life was just too busy to go to too many meetings. And in that year that I was at, I realized, and I have shared it before, as if you don't know how wonderful the fellowship of this program is, then you're just kind of out there. But if you know how amazing it is and how much support you have, you miss it. I was so bereft before I came back. It's like I knew I had lost. I knew I had lost 16 years of sobriety and I could never get those back. And I detoxed in the rooms. And I knew that I would do absolutely anything I could. I would follow any direction just to get my life back again. I didn't have to have anything material again. I did not have to have anything material. I worked the steps. I admitted I was powerless over alcohol and all this had become unmanageable. I admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. But more too shall be revealed. I have done a few fifth steps, a few fourth steps, but more and more there's things I remember. My short-term memory is crap right now, but my long-term memory gets sharper and sharper and sharper. And I have remorse for the things that I have done. I have great remorse. I have found a God of my understanding. My God says, I do a forgiveness prayer. Like I do a meditation, and this is my forgiveness prayer. My forgiveness prayer is, if I have harmed anyone in any way, either knowingly or unknowingly through my own confusions, I ask their forgiveness. If anyone has harmed me in any way, either knowingly or unknowingly through their own confusions, I forgive them. And if there is a situation I am not yet ready to forgive, I forgive myself for that. For all the ways that I harm myself, negate, doubt, belittle myself, judge or be unkind to myself through my own confusions, I forgive myself. I'm surrendered. I'm totally surrendered. And to do like a real moral inventory and tell somebody exactly what you've done, it's hard. It's hard to admit to yourself, never mind another person. you know, and there's still things I'm working on. You know, I'm in the middle of, it's funny when Jim asked me, it's like, oh, what, how did he know? I'm in the middle of doing another 4th step that I have to give to some poor unsuspecting person. But you know what? It's easy. It's easy to surrender when you know that there is nothing but love on the other side. Any 5th steps that I have done, people have looked at me and said, "Is that all? Is that it?" You know, when I thought this was epic, you can be forgiven. You know, the hardest thing is forgiving myself. And I think about all the genetic memory, you know, the fear and the heartache and the alcoholism and the abuse that went on way before me. You know, I love this thing. It says, "Our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we are bound to others, past and present." And the other thing I really like is, if you don't forgive who hurt you, you will bleed all over people who didn't cut you. And I did that. I did that my whole life. I did it. You know what? My greatest release was forgiving my dad. My dad, I would call him dad. I realized that his explosive rage and cruelty was but a manifestation of his suffering. And actually, when he was ranting and raving, he was more afraid than we were. And I have been haunted by my mother's abuse. But you know, my sister came to visit. She loved Palm Springs, and I left her to the airport, and she has not forgiven him. She has not forgiven him. I left her to the airport, and there was this old guy, and he was waving to his grandkids, and they were hugging him, and they left to go on a plane to go home. And he took off his hat and he waved it, and I thought, my dad would have given anything to be like that guy, but he couldn't. You know, he was suffering, and we were suffering. And you know what? I don't want to suffer anymore. I want to work these steps to the best of my ability. I know that I relapsed because, you know, I've been thinking about this because I'm writing that other step. Because I really felt I hadn't worked hard enough to get everything that was given to me, because I got everything. My life was amazing. And you know what? I threw it away, maybe because I thought I didn't deserve it. So I'm doing another step. I'm so happy to have shared this with you. And like I say, you know, I tell new people, find somebody that you want to be like when you grow up and ask them to be your sponsor. I did that. I have an amazing sponsor, and he's there when I need him. And I have women in my life that are so. My daughter's sober, so I'm going to be 19. I'm 19 years sober, and my daughter's 18 years sober. You know, I worried about her so much, and I left it alone, and she found her way. We go to meetings together, you know, and we have a hi Holly. We have this amazing woman Holly in Palm Springs, and she's been having a woman's meeting in her house every Tuesday for 20 years. And even when she's gone, she goes to Maui, she goes all over. Even when she's gone, we open her house. We open her beautiful house to sometimes 30 women. I mean, I can't imagine opening my house to 30 people and me not being there. But she does. And in that meeting, and those meetings, that's where I have worked the steps. That's where I'm accepted, and I feel loved, and I feel worthy of being loved. You know, when I came back into the program and I had nothing, and I thought, I don't want anything back. I just want peace of mind. But you know, when I celebrated my 1 year sobriety, my partner took me to Palm Springs. And I know I was in Palm Springs. She took me to Hawaii. She was raised in Hawaii. And I celebrated my first year at the 12 Coconuts meeting on the beach in Hawaii. I'm from Glasgow. I didn't think I'd get to go anywhere. You know, every time I have a birthday, I tell the story, and every time it makes me cry. So at that meeting, I prayed and I said, the only thing that could make this better is if my daughter got sober. And then, did we cut off?
No, you're good. We're looking at someone else's screen.
Okay, are we good? Okay, we're okay. All right. So my prayer that day was, when I was celebrating my first year, was the only thing that could make this more perfect is if my daughter was here. And then the next year, we were at that same meeting, and my daughter was with me, and I celebrated 2 years, and she celebrated 1. My daughter's sober 19 years this year, and we go to meetings together, and we have a bond, and we go sometimes to meetings with her dad. My life is good, and I can only thank you. So thank you for loving me when I couldn't love myself. Thank you for seeing who I am and loving me anyway. And thank you, everybody, for my life. Thank you for listening.